incredible things Andrew has done with regard to racing. And one thing I found most interesting is he graduated from the London School of Economics with a degree in government and politics. And so I don't know if that says anything about that particular degree or the direction that maybe we all should have gone. But so Andrew, why don't you, Andrew's going to talk about trimming your mainsail. Andrew knows an incredible amount of information about sailing and his brain is full. So he's going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about how you trim your mainsail. So Andrew, it's all yours. So you should be able to share your screen. Is that correct?
Just going to do it now. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, so let me get you going here. We'll find you. And I'm going to make you a co-host. All right, try it now. Come in, Andrew.
Okay, do you see me there?
I see you. We don't see your screen quite yet.
Okay, do you see, is my, do you see my slideshow?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
So find your screen share.
Screen share.
It's green on, there you go.
Okay. Right, so we're up. Good.
You're there.
Well, welcome everybody. Well, we're talking about the mainsail trim tonight, and your questions certainly, go ahead and put them down. I'll give you my email at the end. If there's any follow-up questions on this topic, we can certainly follow up as we go. There inevitably is something to talk about mainsail trim. And of course, for all of us, we've got some racers, we've got some cruisers, got some single-handed sailors, double-handed sailors. So really a broad spectrum, if you like, in terms of the sailors that we're talking with here. As regards the mainsail, the various controls we've got is obviously the main sheet. For those of us who have the ability, we've got the backstay, which we can bend the mast with. Not everybody can. We understand that. We've got the outhaul control, which controls the bottom part of the mainsail. We've got a mainsail traveler. Again, not everybody has one. And of course, they come in different guises and fashions. We've all got the mainsail halyard, and the vast majority of us should have a Cunningham device to control luff tension. And then lastly, but not leastly, we've got the boom vang, and there's a technique which we can discuss called vang sheeting. But before we go into the various controls, the thing I would say, and certainly reaching out to mainsail trimmers there in the audience, is that you really steer the boat ultimately, particularly going upwind. How we trim the sail goes a long way to how the boat's going to behave, the amount of heel angle that you're going to have, the amount of helm that you're going to feel, and ultimately, the performance that you're going to get. And it's one of those trial and error things where you're trying to find the best mix in your performance, so that the boat essentially sails itself with minimal helm, but really with this sort of mantra of a consistent heel angle. So when we're going upwind, we're not heeling over too much excessively in puffs of wind. We have the correct amount of power when the wind starts to fade. So as a mainsail trimmer there, you really are having to keep things going, keep the boat balanced, and try and stay one step ahead at all times. So along the lines here, we've got a little sort of video animation, if you like, of the main, and it just illustrates very quickly the various controls, a backstay, main sheet, and traveler, and then we'll look at more detail as we progress. So we'll run this one. Hopefully the media will cooperate, and Comcast indeed will do it for us. So we start off with the main sheet. You can see the main sheet pulls up and down on the boom. We've also got the traveler, which goes in and out, which controls something called the angle of attack. And then for those of us that have one, the backstay, which we can bend the mast with and shape the sail for a variety of wind and sea conditions. So I can run that again just so we can just take a quick review. Main sheet, controlling the sail in and out and the tension on the leach of the sail. Traveler, changing the angle of attack the sail makes to the wind. And then for those of us who have it, and it's not all of us, I understand, the backstay, which bends the mast, flattens the sail, and can help control the shape. So those are the dynamic controls there. And another quick review: main sheet up, main sheet down, traveler, and then backstay. So I hope you find that a useful tool to sort of look at some of the effects on it. So as regards the main sheet, a couple of things really just to set off with the primary function of the main sheet is to control something called twist. And I've got some pictures to reinforce exactly what twist is. The twist is the curvature of the mainsail leach relative to the center line, going from the top batten all the way down to the clew of the main. And then the secondary function of the main sheet is to control the amount of depth in the sail, and then the angle of attack, which is essentially how we position the sail relative to the wind, and whether the boat's easy to steer, difficult to steer, or somewhere in the middle. So two functions there primarily for us to look at. So main sheet here, looking at the main sheet and hoping that the media does move fairly quickly and Comcast does actually cooperate. Main sheet, as you can see, pulls, lets the sail in and out, but also pulls down on the boom, controlling the leach tension on the sail. And it's interesting to note that when you get a good main sheet setting, you know, for going upwind, one thing we'll do is we'll mark the main sheet where it exits the block, where we're controlling it. So say you get a basically good setting, and typically, you know, for going upwind, if you're not overpowered, that's generally when the boom is on center line. When this top batten here, you can see at the top, when that is on a parallel plane to the boom. So this is your boom here, and there's your top batten. When we can get that top batten parallel to the boom in this plane, and we get some telltale fly as well coming from the top batten. Interestingly enough, with telltales and having been involved with a lot of sail testing, the one to really pay attention to when you're trimming the main is the top telltale. Look at that top one. That really tells the story, quote unquote, of how the main's being trimmed when you're going upwind. And you always want to see some flow on that telltale. If you're seeing no flow, the sail's stalled, likely the boat's sluggish and slow. Skipper's probably complaining a little bit that there isn't other performance. If the telltale's flying 100% of the time at the top, up here, Likely the boat's very lively and moving well, but there may be a complaint potentially that we're not pointing close to the wind relative to the other boats. And so in that instance, you may trim the main a little bit harder and go with a touch more stall on that top telltale, what we call a 60-40 mix, 60% flying and 40% stalling, so that you try to get a good mix of both pointing ability towards the wind, but also keeping the boat moving well and balanced at the same time. We'll look at that more in depth as we go here. So here's the initial trim with the mainsail sheet. We paid particular attention to these telltales up top. Trimmed in tight, trimmed loose. If you trim a bit tight, you'll see the telltales will stall completely. Typically, when you're a little bit over trimmed, you'll see the telltales stalling. The net effect will the boat will slow down, it'll get sluggish. If you've got full telltale flying all the time we would probably do that the most when we've got 100% fly on the telltale going upwind is really in two conditions. One is in light air, which we're all no stranger to here on the South Sound. You want to have that 100% telltale fly in light air, primarily to promote flow so that the sail won't stall on you. That'll give you boat speed. It'll liven the boat up. It'll put you in first gear, if you like. You're in the sort of shifting mode of acceleration in light air. So we like to see that telltale flying pretty much 100% in light air conditions to avoid stalling and to increase flow on the sail. And we also like to see 100% flow on the telltale when either we're very overpowered, you know, in conditions where the boat's simply heeling excessively and you're having to dump power to keep the boat on its feet. We'll go with full flow on the top telltale there, or in wave conditions. And funny, I was thinking about the cruising group earlier, excellent presentation. They're talking about the large swells, you know, that they were having in the Sea of Cortez there. And of course, I was thinking of the waves that we have here in the South Puget Sound, but also the nasty chop that you can have as well. In those wavy conditions, you know, when the boat's really struggling, hitting waves, the advice is to have these telltales flying at the top of your main 100%. And the reason is that when you're hitting the waves, the top of the mast, the top mast is moving fore and aft. You know, it's going forward, it's going aft. And so the apparent wind is shifting all over the place on the top of the sail. So that causes a tendency for the sail to stall, and you can't get the best mix of performance out of it. So we find that by twisting or opening the sail with going telltale flying more towards 100%, that's the way to go in wavy conditions. You'll find it'll allow the sail to keep the flow attached, and it'll give you the best mix of performance. You'll find that if the telltales are stalled in chop, you'll occasionally point well, but more often than not, the boat will struggle with the stall there, and you won't get the best mix of performance. So the time we like to see 100% fly in the telltale, light air conditions when we're perpetually speed building, heavy air conditions when we're very overpowered and we want to dump air off the top of the main, and then in choppy and big wave conditions so that the top of the sail can accommodate the changing apparent winds as the boat's yawing up and down in the chop and the waves there. So those are some of the instances where we like to see the telltales flying. Otherwise, you know, if you feel like the boat's moving well and the helm feels lively will trim on to the point where, you know, you just about stall the telltale. 60% flying, 40% stalling, 60-40, pretty good mix we found in sail testing, you know, in relatively smooth water and conditions that aren't too gusty, you know, and too challenging. Moving on a little bit here. Interesting view, two pictures for you to view out, you know, one on the right, one on the left, sort of a study in contrast, if you like. Looking at the picture on the right here, you can see the main sheets trimmed a little bit harder, and you can see the whole leach profile is a lot firmer with less twist or curvature, particularly in the top of the sail. Then if you contrast the picture on the left, these are J70s incidentally, you can see the twist at the top of the mainsail here near the J70 insignia, and you'll notice that, you know, there's a lot more wind on the left side, left picture. You see the chop, what have you. So this team is depowering the top of their mainsail here, either through possibly bending the mast with the backstay, if you have that ability, and again, not all of us do, or easing the main sheet out and simply allowing the top of the main to twist off and dump the air off the top to keep the boat level. And then you look on the right here, you can see the sea state is less wind, more of a moderate wind. You can see this team is trimming the main on harder, and you can see the top telltale is probably a little bit more stall. The top battens cupped in a little bit more with a harder sheet tension. They're not overpowered, so they feel like they can trim on harder, and that can encourage the boat to point close to the wind, interestingly enough. So, you know, in both instances, though, you know, the overwhelming thought is consistent heel angle. So whenever you're trimming the main, you want to keep the angle as consistent as possible. Now, all of us sail different boats, you know, and they all have different sweet spots. You know, I'm sure you found with your boat that once you get it set up and it locks in, it's like, bingo, this is great. And that takes, you know, experimentation, certainly. But what we found is to get the best mix of performance, pick a heel angle and go with it. You know, and obviously that varies from boat to boat. Some of the boats we sail, they like to be sailed very level, very flat, you know, particularly those with short keels. When you heel, they tend to go sideways very quickly. So you've got to sail the boat balanced and upright. An extreme example of that would be a J24, where, you know, we'll strive to sail with 0 degrees of heel, you know, which is almost sounds crazy, doesn't it, to sail a boat bolt upright. But because it's got a short mid-1970s keel, when you heel it over, you lose the draft of the keel, the boat goes sideways. You know, and then other designs with deeper keels, different hull configurations, you know, you can go with more heel, and your boat is specific in that regard. It might be 10 degrees, it might be 15 degrees, but whatever it is, as a mainsail trimmer, lock it in, and don't be the boat that's heeling over excessively in the gusts, you know, and then coming back upright in the lulls. That means you're not set up properly there. And this team on the left, as you can see, it's windier, so they're twisting the top of the sail off, spilling the wind off the top there to keep the boat level. And this team on the right, they're trimming harder on the main sheet. Boat's not heeled over excessively, so they can get a little bit more power out of their sail and point a little bit closer to the wind. So constant angle of heel, you know, is the thing. Some of us have inclinometers on board. Maybe you can use your inclinometer and lock that one in on how much you're heeling, and when the boat's going well, sort of remember that heel angle. That can be very helpful. For skippers or people steering the boats, you know, it's a really good technique, and I've done this coaching for many, many years, is if you're driving either with a wheel or a tiller, you know, what you can do is form an image, an optical image on the horizon. In this instance, the land, you know, on the right picture, or the horizon on the left picture, between the lower shroud and your forestay or headstay. So form an image between the lower shroud and the headstay there when you're steering, and your goal is to keep that image as steady as possible. You don't want that image moving to leeward or sideways and moving back up again. That's all wasted energy, which takes away from your performance. So try that one maybe next time you're going upwind, particularly if it's on a distance race and you're called to steer a longer time than normal, you know, and they want you to be good. And also as a mainsail trimmer as well, you can do the same thing, is, as I say, form an image on the horizon between the lower shroud and the headstay or forestay, and make it your goal in life to keep that image as steady as possible. What I found, in all honesty, is that that makes the helmsperson better longer. You know, they can drive better for you. If they start looking at the instruments and getting involved with the numbers too much, then over the course of time, you'll find you lose them mentally. And then you start going all over the place, and the performance gets unfortunately gets a bit wacky. So try that one, forming an image. And so striving to keep the boat at a consistent heel angle, you decide what that is, and form an image on the horizon between the headstay and lower shroud, and that can help you lock in your optimum heel angle for going upwind. As a main trimmer, you're trying to set the boat up so that we're at that consistent heel angle, whatever we designate that to be. The backstay mast bend, again, understanding that, you know, a lot of us don't have a backstay, but really what it does is it controls depth when you bend the mast, and the secondary is twist or curvature of the leech of the mainsail. We won't spend too long on this, we'll advance, but here's, for those interested, what the backstay does. On this animation here, you can see the top of the mast bending back closer to the end of the boom, and you can see the middle of the mast tending to bow forward. It's almost like a bow figure. I'll run that one again. So here we are. Here's the mast bend. And, you know, just to stop it halfway here, you can see the top of the mast gets closer to the end of the boom. So the net effect is this upper leech area, this top third of the sail, gets more open or twisted, like that picture on the left that we saw in the prior example. What does that do? Dumps the wind off the top of the mainsail, enables us to keep the boat level in gusty and overpowering conditions. The other byproduct we'll see is that as you apply more backstay, right here, you can see the middle of the mast bow forward. You know, so basically the distance between the luff here, and if you go down this blue draft stripe, going all the way to the leech, the distance between the luff and the leech increases as this goes forward. Well, what's the net effect? That makes the sail flatter. It takes the depth or draft out of the sail, which reduces the lifting ability, albeit, but it also reduces the net drag or sideways force that the sail derives. So a flatter shape with the top of the sail more open, depositing the wind off. All of those things depowering us. So for those of us with backstays, here's the advice. Play them. Play the backstay aggressively if you've got the ability to do it. You may not. You know, It may be inaccessible, it may be tricky, but if you have a flexible backstay, do it, because what we found is that, especially in those changeable conditions on the South Sound, where you're going upwind, and you know how it is, you get a puff, the boat heels over, you've got all the power you need, and then suddenly you've got a light spot and the boat starts to struggle. We are very proactive, if we have the ability, at playing the backstay. So, in the puff, we'll bend the mast with the backstay, spill the wind off the top of the mainsail, and then in the lull, the wind starts to fade. We're the first to ease the backstay off. We're the first to ease the backstay off and straighten the mast and project the mainsail in a more deep fashion for more power. And you sail with some talented teams, some teams that are really really on it. And that's the thing you notice about them, is they play the backstay a lot if they have that ability to keep the basically to shift gears, to keep the boat going. Particularly, I think for us in the South Sound, with light spots. You know how particularly in the races on Wednesday nights, when you sail up to that windward mark, and of course the mark is sort of underneath the land, and the wind starts to fade, doesn't it, and shift and become very challenging. Of course, that happens all over the bay, really. That's the time when if you have the ability to play the backstay, it really can pay dividends. Ease it off when the wind lightens, straighten the mast, project the sail more, and then if you get overpowered, bend the mast back on again if you have that ability. A good call on the puffs also helps as well. So any crew members out there that are watching the wind, you can give us the basically a countdown on the puff, and what we like to hear is big puff coming in 3, 2, 1, now. Puff sustains, followed by a light spot in 3, 2, 1, now. Light spot lasts for 2 to 4 boat lengths, and we play the main accordingly when we hear this communication. For those of us who are performance racers out there, and of course it's good for cruisers too. If you're cruising or just generally day sailing, it's great to see the puff coming, and anticipate it. It's like life, isn't it? You can be one step ahead. It's always going to be helpful. So if you can read the wind on the water coming and anticipate the gust before it actually hits, that way you don't keel over excessively, which on a lot of boats means you'll go sideways, you'll make a lot of leeway, the helm will get too heavy. And if the wind's lightning, you'll be first to power the sail up, put more depth in the sail, straighten the mast, pull the traveler up if you have the ability to, and we'll talk about that more in a second, to keep the boat sailing consistently. So anticipating the wind, that's a big one. And just a diagram here, as you can see, on the left, we've got no backstay and a very straight mast, and you can see how firm the leech is. And then on the right here, you can see a little bit of a bent mast. You can see the upper leech is more twisted or open, tending to spill the wind off the top of the mainsail. I would be remiss if I said that we need to play the main sheet and the backstay together. So for those of us who have the ability to play the backstay, the two are complementary goods, if you can think of it that way. The more we apply backstay tension, like in the right diagram here, the more you actually want to trim the main sheet on a little bit tighter to bring this upper leech in to help the boat point. Just to the point of, the telltale still flying and not stalling. Same thing here on the left. If you ease the backstay off and you straighten the mast, then be prepared to ease the main sheet off as well. Why? To keep your top telltale flowing, and good flow on the top of the sail so that it doesn't stall. So there's the challenge for mainsail trimmers right there. For those of you with backstays, just remember that whenever you make a backstay adjustment, again, if you have the ability, review main sheet tension. It's usually backstay on, main sheet on, backstay off, main sheet off. The two work together. I can expand more on that later in emails if you like, because that's a, well, we could talk for an hour on that one. Well, we could talk for 8 hours just on mainsails. But so just something to bear in mind there. Let's go back. So backstay, mast bend, just a comparison. The left diagram, there's no backstay. You can see how much headstay sag there is. See that in the front of the Genoa or jib? So my thing there, that makes the headsail fuller and more powerful, more dynamic, better for lighter winds when we want that acceleration. And then on the right side, you can see we've got some mast bend going here, a flatter mainsail, a more open leech depositing the wind off, and then if you can see this, but a straighter headstay, which gives you a flatter Genoa or jib. But I'm going to move on there. I don't want to dwell too much on backstay tension for you. There's a lot more to look at. Another quick contrast here. Just look at the mast bend on this FAR 40, how much they've got going. There's how much you can bend the mast, and that will be a straight line, a straight mast. Look at the mast bend. When we, interestingly enough, when we're sail testing, what we look at is we look up at the mast and we just want to see a nice even curve from top to bottom. You know, if there's too much curvature up top relative to the other sections of the mast, very often it means our shrouds might not be too properly trimmed. It could be that the mast is off to one side or the other, or the mast isn't in column. So we're looking for an even curve there. The other interesting thing we're looking for when we're going upwind, and I can talk about a long time on this one, is we try to get the luff of the jib here, the luff of the jib, and we try to get the luff of the mainsail, the two luffs, to break, to break or luff very close together and not as independent contractors. For instance, if you go sailing and you notice that your main is very, very active and luffing with a very, very big bubble, and yet your head sail is perfectly driving and there's just no bubble in it whatsoever, it could be we're a little bit out of balance. You want the two to work as one combined foil, both the main and the Genoa there, and a lot of it, in all honesty, is to do with forestay or headstay tension. For instance, if the headstay is too loose or saggy, you'll see the mainsail will luff early and often. It's because the back of the jib or the Genoa with the headstay sag is allowed to return into the main and causes the main to luff. And you get this really, really big bubble. And the way you can take that out is if you have the ability, is to tighten the backstay, straighten the headstay, and you'll see the mainsail will start driving properly. The opposite's true. If the headstay's too firm, you'll see the front of the jib or Genoa, luff early relative to the mainsail. So in that instance, we'll either ease the backstay and straighten the mast if we can, or it could be that our headstay is simply too long. Too long. We'll actually go ahead and, it's too short. It means that it's too rigid. we'll actually go and extend the headstay slightly by easing off the turnbuckles if they have the ability to. But not to go on too long about that, but you're really well set up when you're going upwind. When the luff of your jib or genoa and the luff of your jib of your mainsail breaks fairly close together, they luff fairly close. If you notice there's this big disparity between the two, then do some experimentation. Usually we haven't quite got set up quite right. Do some different control adjustments and see if you can get them work together, because we're trying to get the main and the jib or genoa to work together as a combined foil, and not as individual contractors. Hope that makes some sense. My gosh, this is a bit shocking for a Tuesday evening. Inversion or overbend wrinkles. Sounds like a midlife crisis or something, but what this is, and you see these big wrinkles emanating from the main. This is poor rig setup, unfortunately, and I hope you don't have this. We could diagnose this anyway, but usually it's one of two things or three things. But when you see these ugly wrinkles emanating from the midluff going all the way back to the leech on your main, it usually means that your lower shrouds are too loose. And sometimes it also means that your diagonal shrouds, if you have diagonals, are a little bit too loose as well. And so what's happening is there's too much sideways bend going into the mast. And so you end up with these inversion wrinkles. So typically we'll either A, tighten up the lower shrouds somewhat, experiment, or B, tighten the diagonal shrouds if you have them to prevent the overbend, so that you've got a nice even bend in the mast, and that gets rid of these inversion or overbend wrinkles. Basically, in sail making terms, what's happening is we're overbending the mainsail to its design luff curvature, to the curvature design in the sail. And we're just overbending it to that. And it means we've got to make a rig adjustment usually. On some boats, it also means, for added complication, that you actually need to move the mast heel, the heel of the mast forward if you've got the ability to, but we won't get into that. But usually it's more lower shrouds or more diagonal shroud tension will fix that one. And if you can do that, you impress the group on board. It's like, wow, look at that. No more wrinkles in the sail.
So Andrew, you might
Yes.
need to speed up a little bit. We still have awards to do, so.
Sorry, yeah, I will. And I'll keep going. So outhaul tension, which I think is of interest to everybody, we'll get on this. Primary thing for the outhaul is it controls the lower depth of the mainsail. So here's the outhaul, and we'll get our, hopefully this will give you your video animation of the outhaul. There's loosening it there. You can see the bottom part of the mainsail getting fuller. And there's tightening it. You can see the bottom part of the mainsail getting flatter. Now, it is the biggest part of your sail, interestingly enough. It's the bottom third of your main. And here's the good news. We've gone out, and certainly from a performance standpoint, set the outhaul to a basic medium setting, and then gone and won the race by a mile and never adjusted it once, So, in terms of in the overall scheme of things, it's yes, of course it's important, but you can get away with not being perfect with the outhaul and you're going to be okay. The thing I would say, for those of us sailing, if you're overpowered, increase outhaul tension, go ahead and tighten the outhaul. This is easing it. But if you're overpowered, stretch the outhaul on as much as you can. That'll flatten the lower third of the mainsail right here. That will reduce sideways depth. in the sail. If you feel like you need a little bit more power going upwind, then consider easing the outhaul off a touch. So we ease it off a little deeper down here. That moves the clew of the sail forward, as you can see. What that does is it closes the lower leach of the sail up to the first batten. That can help the boat point in light, light medium conditions. A little ease on the outhaul there. You can get a little bit more pointing. But then when you feel consistently overpowered, the advice is go ahead and tighten it, quite a bit, just to reduce sideways force. Now, from a downwind perspective, the way we look at the outhaul is we'll ease it off whenever we're reaching. Any sort of broad reach, beam reach, close reach, where you feel like the sail can be a lifting foil, we'll ease the outhaul some, and that will increase the depth of the sail down low, and it'll increase your lifting effectiveness. So that's good. That said, if you're able to go dead downwind or sail very low, with maybe wing on wing, for those of you who do that, or possibly even a spinnaker up, the pole squared back, or an asymmetric floated out there, then what we found is, believe it or not, when you're going very, very low downwind, we found this in sail testing, is leave the outhaul on tight or leave it on its upwind setting. Now, you won't read that anywhere in a book, but it's something we've learned in sail testing, that if you're able to sail low on a run, there's no value in easing the outhaul. In fact, all it does is it makes the sail smaller. It compresses it between the tack and the clew right here and actually reduces projected area. So downwind, able to sail very low, wing on wing, spinnaker, leave the outhaul on your upwind setting. Any type of reach, give it an ease, not too much, to provide extra lift. And that's really the thing. And just one final thought on the outhaul for you. One thing we've done is we've eased the outhaul off the most we ever would, and then we've put a limiting knot in the line. And that way, if you say to your crew, ease the outhaul off and they blow it, the worst case is it's going to go out to, a certain point and no further without turning the sail into a bag. So a limiting knot on the outhaul can be really helpful in terms of making sure we don't ease it too much. Traveler. Now, not everybody has a traveler, but its primary thing is to control angle of attack. That's the angle the sail makes to the wind. And for most of us, going upwind, it can be a vehicle used to balance the boat going upwind there. If we get a gust, we can let the traveler down, like in the right picture here. That can open up the angle of attack and spill the wind off the mainsail. And then when we get a lull, we can pull the traveler back up until the boom's on center line, and that can maintain the power. Fundamentally, when you're a main sail trimmer and somebody says to you, look, trim the main, will you please, upwind? Two things really we're looking for. One, position the boom on center line with the traveler, and then adjust the main sheet so the top batten right here is parallel to the boom in this plane, not up and down, but parallel in this plane, with a 60-40 mix on your telltales. 60% flying, 40% stalling, with the honorable exceptions that I talked about. And then certainly play the traveler in the gusts, to keep the boat level. Puff on, drop some traveler down, opening up the angle of attack, spill wind off the sail, light spot, pull the traveler back up so the boom is on center line there. So you can operate that. And of course, travelers vary. Some are easy to adjust. Some you need a can of WD-40 and a wrench, to adjust it. So hopefully you've got a fluid traveler and you can adjust it. Again, Harkening back to an earlier recommendation so that we can maintain a constant angle of heel. So play the traveler going upwind to keep the boat at a constant angle of heel. You decide what that constant angle of heel is and then stick to it. That'll give you the best mix of performance for going upwind. So here's the traveler. Looking at animation here. It's just a quick one. You can see traveler going, that's main sheet actually, interesting enough. Here's traveler going to leeward, opening up angle of attack, and then pull back up to get the boom on center line for more power going upwind there. So boom on center line, top out and parallel to the boom, some telltale fly, and then play the traveler to keep the boat balanced. Now, as regards the Cunningham and halyard tension, quick couple of thoughts for you. Number one, have marks on your mainsail halyard. You know how in the South Sound, you can go out there and it's extremely light, you know, and it's very easy to overdo the main halyard. You know, when you raise the sail, crew gets excited, you know, maybe a few too many coffees or something, and you end up over hoisting the sail, and then that tends to make it too flat and too unforgiving in light air conditions. So what do? We have a setting on our mainsail halyard for light air, for medium air conditions, and for heavy air. And it controls, the main halyard controls the draft position on the sail. I'm going to run a animation for you here. Hopefully Comcast will let us do that. Easing the main halyard or the Cunningham lets the draft slide towards the back. Tightening it makes the draft slide forward. You can see these red draft stripes as a reference point. Now, where we designed the sail to have the draft is about 45% back from the luff. So if you can consider 0% at the mast and 100% at the leach, the sails had the draft to be designed about 45% back from the luff there, the point of maximum fullness or depth. So when we're adjusting the halyard, you know, the mainsail halyard, and then ultimately the Cunningham, we have this in mind. So if the draft is too far back, we'll either pull on the Cunningham or tighten the main halyard. If the draft is too far forward, we'll either ease the Cunningham, if we have one, or ease the main halyard to put the draft in the correct place. And as I say, something to bear in mind, and maybe folks don't think about it so much, but the draft location on the main also controls the top of the mainsail as well. When you pull the draft forward, it tends to open the top of the mainsail. Sorry, close the top of the mainsail somewhat. See if I can simulate this. There's draft back. You see how it closes it. Here's draft forward. See how it opens it. So sometimes, for instance, when you're trimming the main and you're driving yourself nuts, you know, you can't get the telltales to cooperate. It's like, what's going on? What's going on? Well, very often it's because we've got the Cunningham or the mainsail halyard incorrect. You know, it could be that the halyard's too tight or the Cunningham's too tight, causing the top of the sail to stall. It could also be that it's too loose and it's causing the sail to be too open. So always check your main halyard. And, you know, the other thing to bear in mind is that halyards slip. So over the course of the day, particularly if the breeze increases, be sure to increase main halyard tension, because you'll find it will slip and the draft will slide too far back in the sail. And by the same token, as the wind increases, be sure to apply more Cunningham tension and pull down on the luff of the sail to pull the draft forward. That will give you a flatter, more forgiving shape which will help keep the boat balanced, essentially. So Halyard and Cunningham, primary is draft position, as we saw. Secondary is depth and twist. Make sure you've got a full hoist and then go from there. But it's good, I say, good to have marks on the mainsail halyard for light air and also heavy air, given that the sail has a propensity to stretch. The halyard stretches over the course of time as the wind increases. Let me go back here. So there's the draft location. And now, boom vang. For those of us who have a boom vang, primary thing about a boom vang is it controls twist and depth in the sail, and it changes the function of the main sheet to the angle of attack. So there's an interesting technique called vang sheeting. See the top of this? Picture this. You're going upwind. It's very gusty. Maybe it's the fall, you know, and frankly, the traveler's just not cutting it. You know, the traveler's really struggling to keep the boat level. What you can do going upwind, particularly when it's windy, is you can tighten the vang and do something called vang sheeting, which is play the main sheet to keep the boat balanced with a tight vang here. It's called vang sheeting, and this audio might take a little while. Here we go. So we tighten the vang, as you can see in the top. Vang is tightened. See that comes down, brings the boom down. That flattens the mainsail and enables you to ease the main sheet out in a gust. And you notice how the sail maintains form shape despite the fact that the sheet's eased. That's called vang sheeting. So if you're going upwind and it's gusty, you feel like the traveler's not doing it for you in terms of balancing the boat, you can opt to tighten the vang and play your main sheet to keep your boat balanced. Now, the vang also plays a very significant role for us whenever we're going downwind. You know, whenever we ease that main sheet out and the boom goes out, there's nothing else pulling down on the boom anymore. So the vang is our primary source of leech tension here. You know, in the absence of a vang, that boom's going to rise. We're going to lose all the leech tension and have excessive twist here. So advice, whenever you ease the main out, review vang tension. And what do we look for? We try to keep the top batten on the mainsail parallel to the boom. Now that's parallel in this plane, this way, not this way, not up and down, but side to side. Now, what part of the batten do we use? The tip of the top batten here. So we try to get the tip of the top batten parallel to the boom. And that's good vang tension for downwind sailing, you know, on those broad reaches, beam reaches, close reaches. And you'll always tend to know if your vang's right on any of the reaching legs, because when you ease the main out, you'll notice that the main will have a nice even luff on it from top to bottom, a nice even bubble on the front. If your vang's insufficient on any downwind leg, you'll tend to notice the top of the mainsail will tend to luff first, early and often. So insufficient vang, top batten is falling off to leeward, it's not parallel, and you'll notice that the top of the sail is tending to luff, particularly on a reach, before the bottom part does. Vang just right, tip of the top batten's parallel to the boom, and the sail has a nice even luff on it from top to bottom there. So, as I say, worthwhile to pay attention to vang tension in any downwind situation. More wind, tend to need more vang. Less wind, we tend to need less vang, you know, with a view to keeping that top batten parallel to the boom. So that's the vang there. And, you know, what I'll do is I'll have marks all over the vang for different wind conditions. So we can say things like, you know, ease the vang to the yellow mark or ease the vang to the red mark, because we know it's set up properly for those wind conditions. And you can do the same if you like, put a mark on the vang, agree what top batten parallel to the boom looks like, and then make a mark on the vang and say, okay, let's ease the vang to that point there for optimum shape, you know, for particularly for downwind sailing for us. So that is, I'll wrap up on that one. That's the boom vang. We've hit the major controls. We could spend 8 more hours talking about each individual one. As I say, I'll leave my email with you for follow-up questions. Feel free to email me at any time about mainsail trim or sail trim in general. I'll be sure to get back to you. And thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. I think this video, which we've recorded, will be actually very useful in the years to come as we increase our sailing education. So if you want to go off share screen.